This podcast series is brought to you by Net Zero, a food upcycler providing technology to feed the world better food with less resources, doing their part to reduce, recover, and reharvest food waste. You can find out more at netzro.us. And by the Upcycled Food Association, building a food system in which all food reaches its highest and best use. To learn more about becoming a member or to support the UFA by making a charitable donation, visit upcycledfood.org.
The single most influential person in the fight against food waste, the single most influential entity is the consumer, the household, you and me.
Too good to waste.
Too good to waste.
Way too good to waste.
Too good to waste, absolutely.
Hi, and welcome to the podcast series, Too Good to Waste. I'm your host, Kevin May, and together we're going on an adventure to explore some of the fun and creative and innovative ways that lots of people are doing their part to help find a higher value in unused food and food byproducts that might otherwise be wasted. So thanks for joining me. Let's go see if we can find out about some of these things that are too good to waste. Well, here we are, episode number 1, the very first full-length episode in the series, Too Good to Waste. Man, I tell you what, it's been a long time in the making, and I could not be more thrilled to be getting this launched. As with any podcast series, you always think about, all right, who do we want as our very first guest? And as I learned more and more about the food upcycling movement and talked to lots of people in the food upcycling world, one name kept coming up, Turner Wyatt. He is a social entrepreneur that's been very involved in basically creating some nonprofits and businesses that all make our world more equitable and sustainable. His passion and focus is on the food system and in particular on food waste. He recently was involved in starting and is now the CEO of the Upcycled Food Association. So it seemed absolutely fitting to have you as our very first guest on episode number 1. Turner, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I'm honored to be the first guest. I'm excited about this show.
Well, I certainly appreciate you taking the time. I know there's a lot of information you'll be able to share with our audience. And for me, just to get things started, tell me a little bit about where this passion for food and the food system and food waste came from.
For me, it started in undergrad. I went to the University of Colorado at Boulder. And there I interned for a beloved organization called Boulder Food Rescue. Ended up working there for a few years and was so inspired, I decided to bring the concept back to my hometown of Denver, Colorado, where I served as the executive director for Denver Food Rescue for about 7 years. And during that time, I was just so inspired by the community as it comes together to address these two really important issues of not only food waste, but food security. The sort of fact that everyone has probably heard being the kind of underpinning of this movement is that 40% of food goes to waste, and yet 1 in 7 Americans is food insecure, meaning they experience hunger or they don't know where their next meal is going to come from. And that just seems like a totally unsustainable and unjust reality, but it is a reality. And there's an amazing, powerful, growing movement all around the world that is addressing both of these issues simultaneously. And I was very, very blessed, very lucky to have been a part of it for the time that I was. And that experience working with Denver Food Rescue is really what kind of opened up every other door for me professionally working in food waste and food systems.
Man, what a great sounding program. Tell us, is the Denver Food Rescue still an active organization right now?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm happy to have passed the torch on to Christine Alford, who is an amazing woman and the new executive director. And they are still going successfully, still growing and providing some really amazing, innovative programs in Denver. They're, in my opinion, I'm biased, of course, but they're one of the more innovative food rescue organizations out there.
Yeah, that's one of the things that really hits me when you talk about it. And I think a statistic that a lot of people hear is the amount of food that's wasted. But what's not always connected to that, the point that you made, was the level of food insecurity and how those two can be connected. So it's great to see and understand what Denver Food Rescue is doing. Do you know of other organizations like that in other cities that are doing similar things?
Yes, absolutely. There's many of them. And to the extent possible, I'm excited about having been involved with some work that is intended to allow more collaboration to occur between these organizations, because anyone who works in food rescue could tell you that there's not always the degree of collaboration that they would want. But there are many of these organizations, hundreds, if not thousands, and there is an innovator database that the organization ReFed maintains that is a list of about 500, I think, at least. And so they exist in virtually every city across the country, and there's a big food rescue movement outside of the U.S. as well. It's one of the most straightforward ways to address food waste. And it also has this really necessary benefit of providing food for food insecure populations as well. And so it's an absolutely critical part of our food waste movement and our solution to food waste, which is the number one solution to address climate change, according to Project Drawdown.
So let me get this straight. So I get the point that the food rescuing and reducing food waste has the benefit of providing food and making more food available for food insecure populations. But you talk about climate change now. Help me understand the connection between food rescuing and having a positive impact on climate change. How does that work?
Well, you may have heard, and some of your listeners may have heard a quote that is really kind of remarkable, and you hear it at conferences, and it's sort of like one of the ways that the food waste movement has branded itself as being, a core part of the environmental movement. And it goes like this: if global food waste were a country, its emissions would be the third worst as a country after China and the US. And so that's staggering. Wow, global emissions, third worst polluter, the worse of a polluter than India, for example. That's amazing. And while that statement is true, it's not true for the reasons that might be most obvious. The reasons that get talked about the most is that food goes to landfill, where it decomposes and anaerobically and releases methane, which is a powerful greenhouse gas, more than 20 times more powerful in terms of its effects on global warming than CO2. And so this decomposition of food waste in landfills is a terrible environmental problem, and it's creating climate change. That is true, but that's not the reason that it's true. In fact, the amount of environmental impact that's caused through food waste as a result of food going to landfill is actually minuscule compared to the amount of energy that goes into growing, transporting, and ultimately selling 40% of the entire food system that ultimately does not get eaten. That is the reason that food waste is such a huge environmental problem. It's primarily not because of the emissions that are released when food goes to landfill. It's because of all of the energy that goes into the entire supply chain, the entire value chain of food to create food that is ultimately thrown out.
That is such a staggering, eye-opening concept that you're bringing up here, because I think most of us generally, if we think about the environmental impacts of food waste, a lot of times it's generally associated, like you said, with food going into the landfills. But what you're talking about now is actually much bigger than that. So you're saying every step of the food supply chain actually needs to be taken into consideration.
It is. If you think about the world, agriculture uses most of our water, most of our fresh water, or more of our fresh water than any other sector. And if you think about that 40% of that water ultimately goes to create food that's not eaten, turns out to be about 20% of our fresh water supply goes to create food that is ultimately not eaten. And so it's just amazing amounts of energy and resources, labor, fuel, everything. The lighting in the grocery store that is being shown down on a tomato that is ultimately not eaten. It's an incredible aggregate of all of this energy across the entire value chain that goes to create food that is and sell food that is never eaten. And so that's really why food waste is such a huge environmental problem. And as a result, Project Drawdown, which is an amazing organization, the world leader in ranking solutions to climate change, came out with their book a few years ago that ranked the top 100 solutions to climate change. Food waste ended up at number 3, and everyone in the food waste movement was ecstatic because wow, this is so reaffirming of our work. And as it turns out, they released some new numbers just weeks ago in 2020, and we got bumped up to number 1. So more than 90 gigatons of CO2 equivalent could be removed, drawed down out of the atmosphere and put back into the soil if we eliminated food waste between now and 2050. So the single greatest solution in the short term to global warming and climate change, which I think should really turn on the lights for people when they're thinking about what are the ways that I can be interacting with solutions to climate change and how can I be contributing to these solutions? Well, turns out more than installing solar panels on your home, more than purchasing regenerative agriculture, more than going towards a plant-based diet, the things that we really typically associate with a sustainable lifestyle, more than any of that, the number one thing that you can do to help reduce the effects of climate change is to reduce food waste.
Wow. That's huge. And thank you for sharing that kind of took us from a 40,000 foot view and then brings it all the way down to what we can do. And I want to talk more about what we individually can do about that. But you painted an amazing picture of the scope of the problem and why it is such a problem. I'm reminded of a video that I'm going to post on the show notes that I saw not too long ago. And it's a great video on YouTube of, I think it was either I think it was a strawberry, but basically it followed a strawberry all the way from planting all the way through to the refrigerator where it's sitting in the refrigerator and eventually goes to waste. But everything along the way that you just described, it hits all of those stops and was a very powerful video. So we'll definitely share that. But, to bring this down to an individual level, food waste is a very broad topic, but you mentioned, some of the things that we can do. Just piggybacking on what you just discussed, what could each one of us individually do? What's one step or so that we could do to help with this particular situation?
Well, I think first we need to recognize that we are part of the problem. The single most influential person in the fight against food waste, the single most influential entity is the consumer, the household. You and me, regular person, has by far the most impact on food waste. And that's because as a sector, households are the most wasteful part of the value chain of food compared to anyone else. So everyone thinks, oh, well, grocery stores or restaurants are so wasteful. Look at them culling the food out of the produce section, or think about all the food scraps coming out of a restaurant or a distributor. Think about how much food is going to waste in transit. Well, turns out that as a sector, the most wasteful is actually the food that's going to waste off of your dinner plate in your house and in your refrigerator, the things that you forgot about at the back of your refrigerator. So the first step to being a part of the solution is recognizing that you have the biggest potential to be a part of the solution because you are the biggest part of the problem. And so there's sort of some power that comes from just recognizing that and naming it. And next, I think it's important to break down what are the ways that we can actually contribute to this solution. Well, obviously there's things that you can do in your own home. I've heard some really great tools like keeping a dry erase board on your refrigerator that helps you keep track of what's inside, and using Tupperware better, and going to the grocery store more often, and buying smaller quantities of the items that you purchase when you are there. So and you can read up on this stuff. Dana Gunders, who's the new executive director of ReFed, the organization that I mentioned before, it has a great book called The Waste-Free Kitchen, where she shares some great tips on how to make your home less of a wasteful place in terms of food waste. And the video that you mentioned comes from the NRDC. It's a part of their Save the Food campaign. They're doing lots of great work to promote, the idea that we can all contribute to the solution, which is absolutely true. But what I would implore is that there's a separate type of solution that, as a regular person, you can contribute to. And that is the premise of the Upcycled Food Association. And that solution has not to do necessarily with something that you do inside your home, some habit that you develop or reduce, as the case may be. It has to do with the food that you choose to purchase. And the hypothesis of the Upcycled Food Association is that we can create a food system in which the food that's available to purchase in any grocery store around the world can actually be a part of the solution to food waste by giving consumers the opportunity to purchase food that actually contributes to the solution of reducing food waste. And this is a concept that we should be used to, because in the same ways that people want to align their food purchasing habits with their sustainability values by purchasing plant-based meat products or dairy alternatives to reduce the environmental impacts of animal production, or buying organic food or regenerative organic food because of the impacts that it has on soil. Well, upcycled food is making a analogous claim that we can have a similar impact on food waste by purchasing the right food. And what is that food? Well, it's upcycled food. It's food that is created out of otherwise wasted food products and ingredients. And there's no official definition of upcycled food yet, but we're working on it. But in the meantime, you can think about upcycled food as any ingredient or food product that uses otherwise wasted but totally healthy and nutritious and safe food products to create something new. And again, it's a really powerful statement to make, and very empowering of the consumer when you say, yes, you can contribute to the single greatest solution to climate change just by purchasing the right types of food.
Well, there's some great solutions. Every one of us can do that. And I really appreciate you kind of bringing the whole upcycled food products and ingredients into the conversation, because that's really one of the things we want to talk about and better understand how significant an impact that can have on climate change, on environmental concerns, carbon footprint, sustainability. And you've given us that tool now, something that we can use. And I love what you say about really aligning our buying habits with our values. And one of the ways we can do it is to find products that are upcycled. So my question then becomes, what are some of these upcycled food products, and where would I find them? And is it possible that I might have actually even tried one without knowing about it?
It's quite possible. And the purpose of the Upcycled Food Association is to solve the problem that you just articulated, which is that even though generally when people know about upcycled food, they like the idea, and most of the time, that means more than half the time, they actually want to buy more upcycled food. The problem is that it's a new concept and not everyone knows about it yet. So we're trying to educate consumers on what upcycled food is, basically, and bring companies that are doing this work together to create efficiencies and collaborate and build a community and strengthen the movement around upcycled food. But to give you a couple examples of what this food can look like, well, it's very diverse, first of all. And the most important thing to remember is that any food product that you buy in the grocery store, there could be an upcycled version of that product. All you'd have to do is make the same product, but instead of using conventional ingredients, you use ingredients that are upcycled. So, for example, there's take the beer production, beer brewing process. In beer brewing, you put a bunch of grain in to make your malt, and then when you're done and you've done your boil, and you have your wort sitting over here, which is the sweet liquid that you turn into beer. You have all of this spent grain, and typically that spent grain goes to compost or to landfill or to animal feed, and it's still totally nutritious, and in fact has a lot of really beneficial nutrients. But because of the way that our beer brewing system and supply chain has been set up, it currently just doesn't go to use. And so there are some really innovative food upcyclers out there that are taking that spent brewer's grain, drying it, and doing a variety of things with it, like milling it into a flour that can be used in basically any food product that you can imagine that would include a flour. There's also people who are using ugly produce that doesn't make it off the farm because it is misshapen or damaged or doesn't meet the beauty standards of a grocery store. It's still totally fine and nutritious, but it currently doesn't have a market. So there's a lot of really innovative upcycled food products out there that are taking that food and drying it or milling it into a powder that's used as an ingredient in a variety of other food products. There are people who are turning otherwise wasted bread into spirits or beer. There are people who are taking other byproducts of food manufacturing and creating new flours. For example, taking the byproduct of tofu manufacturing, okara, drying that out and turning it into a flour. So it's really diverse, and you can do just about anything and create just about any product with an upcycled ingredient in it. But that just gives you an example, a couple examples of some of a very small number of the large number of total products that are on the market currently.
Yeah, that's really helpful to get some of these ideas of some of the byproducts that are being used and created and upcycled into then some of the final products. And it reminds me, I get over to Amsterdam a fair amount, and there's a couple of restaurants there called In Stock, and their whole premise is everything they serve is made from rescued food. And in particular, you talked about the beer made from bread. They have a bread beer, and they also have a potato beer made from culled potatoes, some of the potatoes that have been left out in the fields, and they go and collect those and make beer out of it. And it's actually pretty darn good. But as a consumer, if I'm looking for these products, how do I know that it's made with an upcycled ingredient? Is that something that the Upcycled Food Association is working on? Because right now, I got to be honest, when I go into the stores and I look at stuff, I'm looking for this, but it's not easy to find.
Well, that's the problem is right now you would not know. And so let's say I'm a consumer and I'm walking into the grocery store and I want to participate in the single greatest solution to climate change. I can go around and make sure that I'm buying organic food, which is, I think it's like the 10th, buying, regenerative organic food. Project Drawdown listed it as maybe the 10th most effective thing. But that's not as effective as I want it to be. I could buy all plant-based food, which is, I think, the 4th most effective solution to climate change. But that's not as effective as I want it to be either. I want the first most effective solution to climate change to be part of the solution when I'm buying food in the grocery store. But how do I do that? Because there's no label for upcycled food the way that there's an organic label, a regenerative organic label, a plant-based label. And that's one of the things that the Upcycled Food Association is trying to do, is to make it crystal clear every time you walk into a grocery store that here are the upcycled food products, and you can be assured that when you're buying this product, you are reducing food waste and contributing to the single most effective solution to climate change. And so the Upcycled Food Association is a group of more than 60 businesses across 5 continents all around the world who are doing some form of food upcycling. And like I said, very, very diverse product types, and some are suppliers, some are consumer packaged goods, some are technology companies. We really have a great level of diversity represented across the entire food system. And these businesses recognize that, hey, it's a problem that people can't find our products. What if we worked together to create a better environment for business for companies that are working to reduce food waste? And so this year, in our first year, 2020, we are launching a product certification program, which will take the form of a visual logo or seal that will be borne by the label of certified upcycled products, and assure the customer that whatever product that is being purchased has met the rigorous standard for accreditation, and that it's not greenwashing, and it's not just normalizing the waste that already exists in our food system, but it's actually contributing to net positive food waste reduction in our food system. And so that's a program that we hope people will actually start to be able to see in their grocery stores by the end of 2020.
Yeah, I think that's real important because a lot of people are, obviously, they're looking for some validation or verification, I guess, of, once they get interested in this idea and they want to take that action, like you said, make the single most, the number one choice for affecting climate change, for having an impact. How do I do it? So the easier it is for them to do that, the better, I think. So definitely we want to encourage people to look for that as that comes out. Speaking of the members and the different companies that you just referenced, I've got your website up and I'm looking at that. It's upcycledfood.org. And on there, it looks like you have quite a few. These are a lot of the companies that all have upcycled food products. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. If you go to our website, upcycledfood.org, you'll see all of our members, which, like I said, some have consumer packaged goods, some are ingredient suppliers, some are just providing technology that allows for the industry to be more successful by connecting different people throughout the supply chain, or creating new technology that allows for better food preservation and things like that. So I encourage everyone to go check out our members, because ultimately the businesses that are creating and selling upcycled food products and services and technologies are ultimately the ones that you as a consumer are going to be interacting with. They're the ones who are really carrying this movement on their backs. We're just here to organize and create network and collaboration between all of these businesses. But there's a lot of really great products out there already. And chances are you have one in your local grocery store, or you have the ability to purchase their products online. Most of the consumer packaged goods that are within our membership are available either on Amazon or otherwise available for purchase online.
That's what I was wondering. And it looks like that as I'm looking at the website again, this great list of companies, they're all links. So you can go directly to their websites, it looks like. And we were talking before about where would you find it? Where do I find these products? And so I already see your website right away as a kind of a single point of reference where I could go and just look for something, find something, and then it'll tell me what store they're in, or can I buy it online, just like you said. So I applaud you on that. And I think this is a fantastic list. And if nothing else, just going through some of these, I'm getting educated too on, as you say, what are they? Are they a CPG company, or are they in the supply chain? Speaking of supply chain and technology, though, I wanted to touch on that for a little bit, because we know there's lots of companies that are out there creating these products out of upcycled or using upcycled ingredients in their products. My question is, what's going on in between that? In other words, the big companies that are producing or creating a lot of this byproduct, how is that becoming an upcycled ingredient that's usable in these consumer products?
Yeah, that's a really important question, because it touches on a reality that I feel really passionate about. And that's that we can't change the world. We can't reduce food waste and accomplish the greatest solution to climate change by ourselves. And by ourselves, meaning with a bunch of really innovative and charismatic and likable and delicious startup food companies. Ultimately, we need the conventional food system to buy into this as well. And they should buy in, big food companies, because the underlying philosophy of upcycled food really speaks their language. It is a basic business principle to reduce loss. And all food companies have some form of loss, even if it's just a byproduct of manufacturing that goes to, compost right now. That's lost because you can upcycle that byproduct. Let's say you're creating French fries or potato chips. There's a lot of starch that comes from that process. And right now it goes into landfill or it goes into compost. Well, that starch can actually is a really nutritious ingredient that can be used in a variety of food products. And so this is the type of mentality that food businesses need to adopt, that we have so many more resources at our disposal than we're giving credit for. And it is, a business's ability to survive in the marketplace depends on their acute understanding of the ability to reduce loss and to increase profits, right? And so we need food businesses, big and small, to recognize that they are not being as efficient of a business as they could be until they are fully utilizing 100% of the food resources within their system. Okay. And so that's our opinion. We think that big food businesses should jump on board because it's a good business decision. Hey, by the way, it also gives you an opportunity to connect with your consumer, with your customer in a new way, highlights your efforts to contribute to a sustainable cause. And it just is sort of this wraparound, such a rare opportunity where the business, the values of business and the values of the environment and sustainable consumers inherently overlap, where we're actually making more money as big food companies for doing the right thing environmentally instead of having to pay for it, right? That almost never happens, but here it is. And because these businesses are so critical to the overall success, because they have the scale where at the stroke of a pen, if they decided to participate in the upcycled food movement by including upcycled ingredients in their existing products or upcycling the byproducts that are currently going to waste within their own systems, and just the massive scale that they operate at, they could have an incredible impact just at the stroke of a pen by deciding to participate in this movement. And so we really recognize as an association that getting the buy-in from big food companies, established food companies, is critical to the overall success because they just have the scale to create a lot of impact overnight.
So let's just say these companies do get on board. What might that look like? Are there systems in place that can handle that, or what would need to happen?
Well, let's say a big food company knocks on our door and says, hey, we want to create a new upcycled food product, and we want to sell 1 billion units next year. Well, that's impossible unless we have a supply chain that is healthy enough to provide the scale of ingredients that they need to pull that off. And so we really have to think carefully about how do we build a supply chain that is healthy and sustainable and abundant enough to create the type of volume that ultimately we need to be successful as a movement. And it comes down to technology and collaboration. And so we need new technologies, innovative technologies, that many of which already exist and are being scaled right now by our members to create the level of scale that we need to just supply the ingredients that we are ultimately going to see being adopted into conventional food products. And we need collaboration, because ultimately we've all heard that probably everyone's heard that hunger is not a food scarcity problem. It's a food distribution problem. There's plenty of food within the world to feed everyone on Earth multiple times over. But there are still people who experience food insecurity, not because there's not enough food across the entire planet, but because it's not in the right places at the right times. And so our food supply chain is really this logistical question of distribution and collaboration. And it's really about connecting people at disparate places across the supply chain, bringing them together with the right technology. And ultimately, those two things together are going to create the scale and volume that will be amenable to large food companies to start adopting upcycled food ingredients and practices in their own systems. And we're seeing that happen already. Big food companies are reaching out. They want to get involved. And meanwhile, we're creating the collaboration in the supply chain through our membership. Our members are creating the right technologies. And so we're seeing this convergence of all the right factors happening right now. And as a result, I think we're going to start seeing a lot more upcycled food products on the marketplace in the near term.
I hope so too. And I'm seeing the same thing. One thing that I was thinking from some people like to look at things from a dollar amount and as a business. And again, everything is a business at some point. There's an economy that has to be supported for all of this stuff. What do you see kind of, there's been some numbers floating around, but what do you see kind of as the current and projected numbers, potential numbers as far as the size of the upcycled food industry and the economy? In other words, what kind of an impact can there be financially? I know there's numbers on the amount of waste, but what's the opportunity right now as far as that as an economy, the upcycled food economy?
Well, let's take a step back first. I've heard a number from the Environmental Protection Agency that about $150 billion of food goes to waste every year in the US. I've heard some larger numbers as well, but think about it this way. The food economy is worth about $1 trillion, according to the EPA. And so if you take 40% of 1 trillion, that's $400 billion, right? That's an amazing amount of money. And the upcycled food movement is basically theorizing that all of that food that's currently going to waste represents food business opportunity for the future. Every amount of food that's currently going to waste could be upcycled and sold, conceivably, right? And that's the kind of long-term future that we are aiming for, a world in which all food reaches its highest and best use, okay? And so long-term, we want to create a better food system with zero waste because we are upcycling all of the otherwise wasted food into food products that are sold on the marketplace. And so that presents an amazing economic opportunity. More specifically, Future Market Insights did a study last year, 2019, that showed that the economy around reducing food waste was worth about $46 billion. And we think that upcycled food represents a sizable portion of that $46 billion, which is quite a lot. And Future Market Insights estimated that economy would grow by about 5% compound annual growth rate over the next decade, so until 2029. Now, that study also came out before the Upcycled Food Association was even formed. We only formed about 5 months ago, and the study came out about 7 months ago. And so we think that by coming together and creating this industry association specifically for upcycled food, we're going to see a massive acceleration of that growth. And I think that, as consumers get on board and they learn more about upcycled food, we're going to see their acceptance and their demand for upcycled foods really skyrocket. And as a result, the economy is going to grow very, very rapidly. We know that already consumers are excited about upcycled food. University of Otago in New Zealand did a study where about 55% of consumers were interested in buying more upcycled food. One of our associate members, Matson, did a study where between 55 and 60% of consumers wanted to buy more upcycled food. So in both cases, more than half, most people want to buy more upcycled food. And again, both of those studies were done before the formation of the Upcycled Food Association. And so again, that's before any strategic marketing for upcycled food has taken place, before there was even a definition of upcycled food, which we're releasing, by the way, in partnership with Harvard and Drexel in about a month, an official definition. None of this existed when these studies were done. And so the economy, the consumer understanding, the consumer demand, these are all things that are going to be accelerated greatly by the entire network of upcycled food businesses all around the world coming together and strategizing to have the greatest impact possible.
Well, the work that you're doing with the Upcycled Food Association clearly couldn't have come at a better time. I mean, you've got all these different players that are all starting to collaborate. The key now, it looks like, is really education and awareness of the concept of upcycling food and its impacts. And you all are working on that definition with Drexel and Harvard, you mentioned. So as soon as that comes out, by all means, let us know, and we will pass that along. We'll put it in the show notes on our website for episode 1. What I'm wondering now is when you think about the different parts, and you just talked about some of the big food manufacturing companies and, trying to get them to turn the ship a little bit and become more involved in this upcycling process and creating products and all. That's one end of the spectrum. The other end, of course, goes all the way to us as consumers. So if you had to identify who you feel has the most power right now to affect change in this upcycled food movement, who would that be?
The most important person in this entire equation is the consumer. And, it's you really, as a food consumer, as someone who goes to a grocery store or market or wherever it is that you purchase food, you really have an amazing amount of power. Because what you're doing is you're investing in this really large and impactful system that has a tremendous impact on the overall economy and on your health, the health of our communities, and of course, the health of the environment. And so when consumers want something, and when consumers get organized behind a topic, they can have an incredible impact. An impact that totally eclipses the impact of any other single actor in the food system or any system for that matter. And so if consumers want to see something, then it's game over. Food systems, food companies will get on board. If consumers want to see, big box grocery stores with, the same products that they've been buying for years, but with upcycled ingredients in them, that's what they're going to get, because it's the basic supply and demand equation. And even big food companies are responsive to the desires of consumers. And so by participating in the solution, by aligning your sustainability values with your purchases as a food consumer, you are helping to create a new system in which big food companies, small food companies, everyone, small farmers, everyone adjusts their way of doing business to your preference. And so it really, at the end of the day, comes down to what do people who buy food, regular people who are buying food every day, what do they want to see? And what we're finding more and more is that they want to see food that is in alignment with a world that they want to create. And the best way to create that world to avoid the effects of climate change is to reduce food waste. And the way to reduce food waste while shopping in your grocery store is to buy upcycled food. And so, that's why I'm so inspired. It's because at the end of the day, the people who have the most power in this equation are just regular people.
Yeah. That's exciting. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. And the exciting thing about that is it truly does empower us as a consumer. And I think what a lot of people talk about with big topics like that is, wow, that's amazing. I love it. I agree with it, but what can I do? And you just laid it out. So I would encourage all of you to go to your local grocery stores, go to your co-ops, your local farmers markets, and start asking for products that are made with upcycled food ingredients. So, Turner, shifting gears just a little bit, I wanted to find out a little bit more about the Upcycled Food Foundation, because let's say I'm a consumer and I'm real excited about the work you're doing, and I want to be a part of this and help support it. What are some of the things that the foundation is doing, and is that something that I can help support through a donation?
Yeah, so the Upcycled Food Foundation was established to carry a lot of the educational efforts that we will do. At the end of the day, this is all about educating consumers on food waste and presenting solutions to regular people so that they can be a part of the solution to the greatest problem that we're faced with, climate change. And so, yes, the Upcycled Food Association accepts donations. If you just go to, again, upcycledfood.org, there's a donate button right at the top of the website. And when you contribute $1, $10, $100, $1,000, whatever it is, to the Upcycled Food Foundation, you're helping small businesses, you're helping farmers, you're helping all the people who provide food to us right now make better, more sustainable decisions. And you're also contributing to the single greatest solution to climate change, the reduction of food waste in a consumer-driven, economically sustainable way. And so this is not money that is going to big food companies. This is money that is staying right in-house to do research and to develop our understanding of this solution and to ultimately educate consumers and regular people on food waste so that we can create the future food system in which all food reaches its highest and best use.
It's a great mission. And I tell you what, I'm on board 100%. I love it. So if I wanted to follow some of what you're doing with the association and the foundation, do you have some social media platforms you're using right now?
Yeah, we have a very active LinkedIn, and we'll be launching our Instagram here soon enough. So Upcycled Food, I think we already have the handle. We're just waiting to launch that on Instagram.
Great. Well, we'll put that on the show notes as well when it's up, and make sure people can find you there and follow you. And I have to say, looking at the member list, one of the things that I just smile about when I look at the companies that are in this and is the creativity. And I think if nothing else, just looking at the list, you can't help but just appreciate some of the names of the companies: Fancy Pants Baking, Wise Monkey, Misadventure Vodka. I mean, just to name a few. There's the Ugly Company. I mean, you got to love it. It just goes to show that while people are very passionate and serious about what they're doing, they also like to have fun. This has to be fun. It should be fun, right? Speaking of that, I wanted to ask you, I always like to ask this, of all the work that you've done, and I know it's been a lot of hard work and sometimes maybe feels like it's not going as fast or as you'd like it to or gaining the traction that you want. But if you reflect back, like maybe through Denver Food Rescue or even with the Upcycled Food Association, what is one thing or something that really stands out for you as a high point, something that you feel really good about?
Well, here is a timely one. Of course, here we are at the end of March 2020, and the coronavirus pandemic is in full swing, and everyone's life across the entire planet has been changed by this pandemic. And small food businesses are being affected most drastically. I'm sure everyone has heard about the effect that this pandemic has had on restaurants and small food companies, that depend on revenue from a variety of sources. Many of our members are startup food companies that were doing things like selling food to office buildings, and no one is at their office right now. And so, small food businesses are really feeling the weight of this historic event. And I was really inspired recently when a couple of our members are online retailers, which, as you can imagine, are booming right now. Everyone is at home and still wanting to get the groceries that they can that they rely on. A couple of our members are online retailers that provide otherwise wasted foods delivery right to your door, and they decided to help out the rest of our members who had consumer packaged goods by saying, hey, even if your product isn't the type of thing that we would normally carry because we focus on produce or whatever it might be, send us a product description and we'll put your product up on the site. And so it was just this really encouraging solution that was clearly able to take form because of increased collaboration. And I say it's timely because it's cliche at this point. We hear it every day and amidst this pandemic, but we're going to get through this together. And I think that's true now as a planet as we kind of endure this unprecedented time. And it's also true of any environmental or social movement. We're stronger when we're together. And so to see our members collaborate in a time of need to help these small businesses stay afloat was really inspiring, and such a good reminder that, we are all in this together. And the more we're together, the stronger we are. And so really inspired by all of our members, and would just like to thank them for their support of our mission. And thank you, Kevin, for allowing me to be here.
Absolutely. You're very welcome. It's a real honor to have you on as the first guest, because I think you're really laying the groundwork for this whole movement. And what you've done with the Upcycled Food Association is incredible. And I wish you all the best. And it's neat, like you said, and I love that point that the members are collaborating. And I think that's a credit to you having, again, put this association together and brought all of these people together, and they're talking. Now, some of them were talking anyway, but I mean, now more of them are all talking in a large collaborative environment. But I also see the opportunity right now, especially in light of what's going on, where people are sheltering in place and stuck at home. And as you mentioned, many of these companies that are small companies, really on the verge of, are they going to make it or not, do sell their products online. And so just really want to reiterate that, now more than ever, if you're looking for a way to support this whole concept, and like you said, it's not just support it just for the sake of supporting it. These are values that a lot of us have talked about. So how do you align your actions with your values? This is one way to do it, is to go to these companies, buy their products online, keep them going. It'll get shipped to your door. If you're in your city, they might even be able to deliver them directly to you. So we have to make the best of it. You're right. We're all in this together, and we'll get through this. And it is going to take that community collaboration. And I really can't emphasize and appreciate enough what you said about really empowering each one of us as a consumer to be able to do our part. And there are some things that you can do, as well as we continue to go through this, going into your grocery stores and co-ops and farmers markets and what have you, as they reopen, and asking for products that are upcycled. And if they don't know what that is, well, then you can start educating.
Yeah. Start asking around. Ask the vendor at the farmer's market, ask, the attendant in the grocery store, hey, do you have any upcycled foods? The more we use that word, upcycled, the stronger this solution will become.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your time. We've covered a lot of ground. And again, just to remind all the listeners, we will have show notes. It'll be on toogoodtowastepodcast.com. This is episode 1 with Turner Wyatt. All the different organizations and companies that you've mentioned, I will have links for, and we'll have a couple of videos up there that you can take a look at. And when you all post the official definition of upcycled food in a month or so, when that gets released, we'll put that there and update that as well. We appreciate all that you're doing on behalf of all of your members and look forward to talking to a lot of them. That's the other thing that's going to be coming up in this series is talking to more of these companies that are members of the UFA and people who are doing things, as well as you, the consumer. I'd love to hear from you. So we encourage you to send us emails. There's a contact form on the website, toogoodtowastepodcast.com. Turner, thank you very much. Anything else you want to add?
No, thank you so much, Kevin. Been a real pleasure and an honor to be the first guest. I'm excited about this series. So thanks so much for having me.
You're very welcome, Turner. And remember, you can find out more about the Upcycled Food Association at upcycledfood.org. And you can also follow them on LinkedIn. And as they mentioned, pretty soon they'll be on Instagram as well. So there you have it, episode number 1 of the Too Good to Waste podcast series. I'm your host, Kevin May, and it's been a real pleasure having you join us on this episode, and we look forward to having you come back and listen to future episodes. We've got some amazing interviews lined up that I don't think you'll want to miss. You can help us out by liking us wherever you listen to your podcast. 5 stars would be absolutely amazing. We would greatly appreciate that. And also sharing it with anybody you think might be interested in this topic. Also, you can follow us on Instagram. Give us a shout. You'll find us at toogoodtowaste_podcast. Special thanks go out to Sue Marshall, aka my wife, for helping with the creative development on this podcast series, and to our production assistant, Amy Gilbert, who helps with writing, researching, and is our resident upcycled food baker. And of course, to our sponsors, Net Zero. You can find them at netzro.us and the Upcycled Food Association at upcycledfood.org.
Too good to waste. Absolutely.